Hey guys, welcome back into Legacy. So we're gonna start up a new little feature here on the channel called Knights of the Round Table. And today I'm going to be joined. I'm supposed to be joined by somebody else. There's a little snafu on timing, but we're gonna have Matt from the Second Watch. Just make sure you get your channel name right now.
What's up, guys?
And we're gonna hit up and talk a little bit about rules complexity, how rules complexity should work, the value in rules light versus rules heavy, all that kind of fun stuff. And if I have my way, we'll do it as quick as we can so that we don't waste your time. And don't waste Matt's time because I know you have other things you probably got to take care of today.
Yeah, it's one of the rare weekends I actually have some time off from various life obligations.
Yeah, you can't see it. I have a bookshelf my dog knocked over that I have to pick up, and I have to put all the books off.
Ah,
Yeah, I'm about to have a pit bull sized rug. This is the second bookshelf he's knocked everything off of in like the last week. So I got a ton of RPG books and novels and stuff in the middle of my bedroom floor now. Anyways, so let's jump into it and no time like the present, right? So just to start off, I'm going to define what I think of when I think of rules complexity, and then you can go ahead and give me what you think if you agree, disagree, whatever. And we'll go from there. So when I talk about rules complexity, guys, I'm not just talking about the actual how many rules it has. I'm talking about the actual functionality of the rules, how the subsystems interact, all of that stuff. I'm talking about do you use one core mechanic across every system? Do you use multiple different mechanics? All that kind of stuff. So we lay the groundwork for how I view rules complexity. It's more than just are there a lot of rules or not. It requires a lot to get into. I don't know if you agree with that or if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, I think it's a fair definition. I mean, I think even like with a system that's got like a core mechanic, that depending on how that core mechanic gets modified, that could very well become a very complex system versus something like classic Dungeons and Dragons where you have a lot of subsystems. But like even like BX, I wouldn't consider a very complex system, even though it has a variety of subsystems. So yeah, no, I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah. Which then leads into the idea of what do people mean when they say rules light versus like rules heavy. Rules light to me is, like you said, like a BX, Lamentations, even somewhat Powered by the Apocalypse does it. The Mutant Year Zero engine, the Year Zero engine from Free League, those are all what I would consider rules light, in that they basically have one good core system, a couple of subsystems, but that the rules are not heavily applied, and it requires a lot of interpretation and a lot of on-the-fly application. Whereas rules heavy would be something like particularly 3.x D&D, Roll Master, something like that, where there are a lot of moving parts, lots of complexity to the rules. The subsystems are complex, and you have to really you don't get a lot of play in the joints because a lot of the rules cover a lot of those. Where BX would allow a lot of interpretation, they don't allow as much interpretation.
Yeah, I think that's. I think I agree with that. For me, a complex game is one where I have to either have a lot memorized, or to run a game smoothly, or I have to like reference a book a lot running the game, and like I'll even have tabs in the book so I know for like the common questions kind of thing, the common rules we're going to be looking up for a quicker reference. So yeah, I don't know if I consider BX rules light, but it's definitely, if you think of it in terms of a spectrum, it's definitely on that side of the spectrum. But I'm thinking rules light, I'm thinking something like I guess maybe Mark Borg is kind of rules light. definitely in that vein. I've someone from my server is actually just wrote a rules like game. It's like 8 pages, 4 to 8 pages, something like that. And it's very minimalistic. To me, that's definitely a rules like game. But BX, I would say, with the subsystems, takes it out of rules light. Rules light, I think, aside from the fact that it's just bare bones, I think if it's one of the defining features is like you have a simple mechanic that handles pretty much everything, or a single die that pretty much handles everything. So yeah, I wouldn't call BX rules light, but it's definitely in that direction. And it's one of the reasons why I prefer BX and its progeny, like Lamentations, because I don't need to reference much at all while playing and running a game. And it gives me the flexibility to kind of do what I want in the moment, and even outside of the game when I'm prepping something and I have an idea, I can like draft a rule set to bolt onto it, so that's one of the reasons why I like that. So but on the flip side though, I look at something like Adventure Conquer King, and that is pretty straightforward in terms of how to adjudicate a roll. It's a D20 target number system, but it is so every rule has, I shouldn't say every rule, but a lot of the rules have exceptions or modifications that are referenced in other areas of the books. And I say books plural because something in the player's handbook will be referenced in the judge's journal, which could end up getting referenced in the monster manual. And there's a lot of page flipping. So to me, ACTS is a kind of a complex system. Maybe not the most complex, but I consider that a complex system. There's just a lot to it. And then when you get into the upper levels and you're starting to look into domain play, there's these subsystems that are like, they've been play tested and mathematically, calculated in such a way. I mean, it's quite an accomplishment in terms of game design, but I would consider on the complex side of the spectrum, with like something like I don't know. Well, I think you said 3.x, and that line of games, I think that's fair because there's just so many feats, right? And the feats can like be altered by other feats, and then there's these.
Yes.
And I still to this day chuckle. They had the worst wrestling rules. It was like 1,000-word essay.
Yes.
just to wrestle. Like what?
College
no one's allowed to wrestle in my games. Yeah.
Yes. Nobody's playing a brawler. Forget it.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a controversial statement in context of this. A game that I would say is rules medium, and I'm going to say rules medium because of the character creation process, but its actual rules are pretty light, is Hero. Once you get through character creation in Hero, the rules are actually not all that complex. It's pretty much the only super complex rule they have really is the half die. Half die and combat is a little complex, but its base mechanic is so simple that a grade scholar can figure it out. It is a 3d6 roll under system. I mean, that is what it is. And the problem with Hero is that so many people have heard horror stories about character creation for Hero. If you're like me, I went out and got a Excel sheet to create hero characters. If you have something like that will do the calculation for you guys, Hero system is not that hard of a game, but it's not. I wouldn't consider it rules light, but I wouldn't consider it rules heavy either. So it's kind of that mid-grade rules medium, which is kind of where I like to stay anyways. I'm kind of a rules medium guy. I like there to be enough rules to be functional, so I don't have to make up a lot of rules on my own, but I don't want it so heavy that you're literally like crying trying to figure the game out.
Yeah. No, yeah, I see that and I hear that. I actually think 5e, at least in the 2014, the core books kind of fall in that ground. And that was actually one of the what I found appealing to 5e was precisely because a lot of the stuff was streamlined. I mean, granted, the streamlining created some problems, like the feats were very OP at times, but I mean, it was pretty straightforward. It was easy to learn, and there was enough complexity that your rules lawyer player who likes diving in and trying to maximize builds and optimize things, they have something to sink their teeth into. So yeah, I would put 5e in that. And that game we played for a little while, Mythcraft, I think falls in that too. It explains why you liked it so much. It wasn't my favorite game, but yeah, it kind of falls in that kind of area as well. So
we're discovering as we're playing through Alternity, we're discovering that it's very much in that vein too. Even though, so all the subsystems in Alternity use the same base mechanic of it's a roll under system, a D20 roll under system with a situation die. So you don't get flat bonuses and penalties in Alternity. You roll for your bonus or penalty based on the circumstance. It assigns a die to give you a bonus or a penalty number. So like you can get incredible penalties. You can get like a minus or a plus 3d20 penalty to your d20 roll. Try rolling under on that. But at the same time, it's not complex. Again, it's one of those games. That game is an artifact of the 90s. You can definitely see it. It's one of those games when you look at the character sheet, it's going to overwhelm you because you see all these boxes for all these scores and all these numbers, and you're like, oh my God, there's all these numbers. And then you start playing and you're like, yeah, but these numbers are easy.
Yeah. I think 4E suffered from that because there was all the different categories of bonuses or penalties you could get on attacks and then on defense, your armor class, and it was just like your character sheet had like an entire line dedicated to calculating your armor class because there's all the shield bonus, magic bonus, circumstance bonus, this bonus, that bonus. It was just ridiculous. And most of the time you really only needed 2 or 3 of those boxes. And so that was like where complexity just became burdened the game, right? Like aside from all of the other issues you could say for 4E, I think that's where they in an effort to try to get very precise with it and gaming, I think they ended up just burdening the game, and it became more of a math thing. Like I'm playing Warhammer 40K. Like, okay, how many dice am I rolling? Okay, I got 2 of these, but these are good. Okay, 26 d6s. And then you're rolling. But like, okay, I'm swinging my sword, but it's a +1 here. I got a strength here, but I got this one penalty here. It's just like it was just ridiculous. So that's where I just do not like a game that gets that granular. And there's going to be a way to streamline it.
I'll tell you the system that it's pretty much brand name new. It came out in 2023, and that's the Promethean system for Ys and Trails of Destiny. So the way you roll is always roll a d20, and then you add bonus dice that start as d10s, and then if you can take bonuses and penalties, they'll change that die type occasionally. But anytime you read a bonus or penalty in that game, they use specific language to tell you you're changing the die type. But if it says you have a +1 bonus, it is not +1 to the roll. It is +1 bonus dice. So if you would normally roll a d20 and 2 bonus dice with a +1 bonus, you'd roll a d20 and 3 bonus dice instead. Which does away with all that extra mathematical calculation and stuff. Because now you're like, oh, well, that's easy. I just add a die.
Right.
Or subtract the die. Versus being like, oh, so I have +5 from this, +3 from this. Oh, but -2 from... No. I don't want to do complex math, man. I don't want to do quadratic equations to figure out my attack scores.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's where I think some game companies, game designers, kind of stumble because we want to make sure we have a smooth running game session where we're not And again, it's going to be different. Everyone's a little different.
Yeah.
I think there is like sort of like a Goldilocks sort of area on that spectrum from
Yes.
complexity to light that where there's a lot of room to breathe. And like I said, I'm a little bit more on the light side where BX falls. Um, but I know a guy who he's in my gaming group, in-person gaming group, and he, for him, we argue about this all the time. Um, for him, he thinks being immersed is diving into a rule system and optimizing your character, because he's like playing with the rules, and I'm like, that's not immersion, dude. But
Yeah.
but he would be on the complex side. Like I showed him Adventure Conquer King, and he's like, I really like this. Like I knew you would. So
Yeah.
but
And
yeah, but anyway, there's a lot of room to breathe there. But like
yeah,
some companies, I think, just go way, 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 way
very,
outside.
very, yeah.
And I mean, it's
But,
like I'm not a big fan of
yeah,
like ultra rules like games, and I'm certainly not a fan of like of the other extreme, highly crunchy games like
well, and I was
Roll
gonna say,
Master.
yeah. So like Rollmaster, if you talk to people who play it, and I love Rollmaster. I don't know if I've ever gotten that conversation with you. I've actually run Rollmaster campaigns.
Oh wow,
Um,
yeah,
I love Rollmaster, but Rollmaster, when you put together a Rollmaster campaign, you have to be aware from the word go that you are going to have a very specific type of player in a Rollmaster campaign.
yeah,
Uh, Unfortunately for the player base, it's just how it is. Um, Unfortunately for that game, because it is ultra heavy. It is a very heavy rule set. There's a lot of rules referencing. There's a lot of math involved. Like for example, in standard system, to take a deliberate action, so you get your bonuses to your skills. Like, oh, I have a plus 75 in a skill. The problem is when you take a deliberate action, you can only use up to 60% of your bonus.
okay. So is that sixty
So you,
percent, or am I
yeah,
multiplying 75 by 60% to figure out what my
yeah,
percentage is?
you're taking 75 multiplied
No, no,
by 6.
no, no, thank you, sir. No, thank you.
And you're like, wait, okay, so I can take 100% action, so I can take a deliberate action or a deliberate action and a full action. That's going to be 100%. Or two deliberate actions and a full action. That's going to be 100%. And you're like, oh God, but now I have to calculate the
Yep.
bonuses.
Yeah. 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 No, thank you. No, thank you.
So it's very much it's one of those games that when you sit down and play, you know that you're getting a very particular player.
Yeah. 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 Someone who's like into that sort of thing for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the reverse of that's true with rules light, with like Fate is a good example. When you run Fate, you're getting a very specific player in a Fate game. You're not getting the average player in a Fate game because of the way Fate plays. It's very rules light. It's very story driven, not mechanics driven. So that's going to be a different player than a BX player.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and I will say this: one of the first things you can look at if you want to know how complex a system can be, um, or get an idea for how the mechanics kind of look. Honestly, this sounds counterintuitive. Always start with a character sheet for a game, uh, because if a character sheet is 6 pages long and it's not like three of those pages are not like background information, you are probably looking at a fairly complex game.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I like what I love about BX is and its line of games. A lot of them can fit on like a postcard. Your character
Yeah.
sheets. If you really don't need like a full page.
Yes.
But I agree with you on that. And in fact, this goes back to something I saw. I saw an old video of pundits where he's like reviewing a game, and the game on I think it was Encore, but the game is fine. It's not a terrible game, but it starts off with explaining the rules. And
Mhm.
pundits like you really should start with the character creation process. That should always be your starting point, because it's a slow introduction to how the character is going to interact with the quote unquote game world through the mechanics. So you're rolling your attributes. You're then determining your armor class or defense or whatever, and how much damage you're doing. This you're doing, and it's all steps by step process, and it can ease players into the game that you're about to play. And I would agree with you that like a complex character sheet is let me rephrase that the character sheet is a good clue as to how complex your system is going to be, because that's the starting point, you know.
Yeah. So just talking about this is the Anima Beyond Fantasy character sheet. Which, if you guys are on the channel regularly, I'm doing the deep dive on this game. You can see for yourself just by looking at this sheet. You're immediately like, "Oh my god, that's a lot of numbers."
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
That's a ton of numbers. It gets worse. Wait till I show you this. This is where it gets kind of goofy. That's the magic path system.
Oh wow.
Yeah. It's a complicated game. It is a very detailed game, and they're upfront about the fact that they base this game pretty heavily on things like Rollmaster, as far as complexity goes. So, and then you could take a sheet like Corpse Kings, which is 1 page.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
So when you look at that, you're like, well, that's a lot simpler than it. That seems like it's going to be fairly easy to pick up, because I wish I could get a hard copy of that book. That book's a $80 hard copy for a landscape full color.
Yeah, that's a pricey book. I have it on PDF.
I have it on PDF.
Yeah, I did a review of it some years ago when it first came out, and the author, the designer, gave me a review copy. It's not a bad game. I like how he's got like the tree system with like your abilities and stuff. I thought that was kind of innovative. It's different, you know. But but that's not a very complicated game, as I recall.
No.
I would put it in like in the middle, I think, maybe.
Yeah, it's kind of a middling game from complexity view. It's not complicated at all, but like you look at that character list from Anima, and immediately, if you saw that sheet and you're a first time player, you're gonna be like, holy crap, what am I getting into?
Oh yeah. I'd be a little worried. In all honesty,
it's very, very detailed. But the big thing to keep in mind is the idea that complexity does not automatically equal bad. And I think that's something that floats in the RPG space among certain subgroups, that complex games aren't as good as simpler games. Like I said, I had a ton of fun running RMSS standard system, and it's probably the most complicated game I've ever run. You can have really good complex systems. And on the reverse side of that, you can have rules light systems that are just god awful.
Oh yeah. Like I when I was dabbling into rules light, I picked up a horror game called Wendigo for $8, and I think it was based off of Black Hack, and it was fine, but like there was just not enough to sink your teeth into, and I just didn't like it. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm just not a rules like guy. I need to have a couple of subsystems, something to like, you know, because one of the things I like about subsystems is that you know, mechanically it's different from the main mechanic that you're using, right? So when you go and do the thing that requires the subsystem as a player, it feels like you're actually doing something different. So like wrestling, or the classic subsystem is the reaction roll in D&D. Like it's a 2d6, you know, and you're consulting a chart, and are they friendly or not, and your charisma bonus applies to that, and you know, that's very different from combat where you're rolling a d20 and checking the chart, you know. So like it's I like subsystems that do that sort of thing, and that's it's actually I mean, I'm not inside Kevin Crawford's head, but when I played Stars Without Number and saw how he did combat versus skills, I was like, this is actually quite brilliant. Because the skills use a 2d6 system similar to Traveler, right? And the idea is you got that bell curve, and more often than not, you're going to succeed. If we roll an 8 or higher, um, after using bonuses and stuff, because
Yep.
it's your character's knowledge. It's not going to be swingy like a D20 roll would be, which I think
Yes.
in modern D&D and other games, I think that's where they go wrong. It's just too swingy. But in combat, you're using a D20. In combat, it should be swingy because combat is chaos and it's just a messy thing to get involved in, and it actually heightens the danger. I think when you go from the first half of your game session, you're rolling all these skill checks and whatnot, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we got to fight, and you're like, oh crap.
Mm.
Things are going to get messy. The D20 is going to be very swingy. Who knows what's going to happen. So I think that's a really smart choice, and it really highlights the beauty of a subsystem. And I really think a lot of modern games, as much I like Shadow Dark, it's getting that on the rules light side of the spectrum, but it's just a D20 mechanic, man. Like, I think there is a reaction roll table in there. But I know morale checks are done with a D20, so it's like, I think subsystems are a lost art. I really do.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite games, the subsystems use the core mechanic in a different or more unique way. So, like, for example, alternative psionic powers are just skills.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But the way they function, they are functionally different than normal skills. Because, like, the way PowerPoints are consumed and things like that, it's like PowerPoints are consumed and stuff is different because you add that little layer of complexity on top of that core system to get the psionic power system. Which I'm okay with. I'm perfectly okay with that. But if you get into, you start getting into subsystems and stuff, the problem with a lot of subsystems for a long time, I'll say from probably about 2000 and maybe 2000, 2002 till about maybe late 2010s, a lot of games wrote subsystems that use like completely different mechanics. Where it was like you were playing a different game.
Yeah. That's though that would be. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but yeah, I can see that being kind of a maybe not good design. Like, it's still got to be consistent, right? Like, again, I go back to BX, like, your elf's ability to spot a hidden door, right?
Yeah.
That's a subsystem, and it's just simple. It's a D6 roll, right? And then if the dwarf's ability to spot a sloping passage was all of a sudden like this percentile system, I think that would be a little weird. But that is also a D6, so there's a consistency there.
That was always a complaint from D&D up till 3.0 with rogues. Everybody else used a D6 for their special abilities, and rogues were on percentile.
Yeah. But just hype up Tenkar. He actually made a really good point about the rogues, the thief's skills in a video about a month or so ago, where it's like it's more of a saving throw. It's like this added thing that only the thief can do, and so in some ways, the percentile system actually makes sense when you understand it like that. Like the warrior and the rogue run into a room where there's this big drape, or tapestry or something that hangs down to the floor, and they want to hide from like a group of orcs chasing them. Both the warrior and the thief, can easily hide behind the tapestry. You don't need to roll for that.
Yeah.
Right. But if there's only room for one person, the warrior goes behind the tapestry. The thief has this preternatural ability to just kind of go into the shadows of the room and just stop moving. And the orcs just kind of come in, look around, and like, whoa, where did they go? And then they leave. It's like this last ditch effort to like avoid detection when no one else can do it. I like that. And actually, mark this down on your calendar. I'm about to criticize Lamentations. The way Rajic describes that skill, the sneak skill, he actually conflates the two, and I don't think he should have. Like, so the fighter going behind the tapestry would still have to roll a d6 and get a 1 or better. Yeah, have to roll a 1 in 6 chance of being successful. And same thing with the specialist. So I think that's I actually say I think that conceptually is inaccurate. I think it's better. BX does better with that understanding, that it's this preternatural ability. But in Lamentations' defense, like everything is streamlined, so like everyone has access to those thief skills.
Yes.
It's just they don't increase. That's why they're called specialists, because they can increase those skills. So I don't know. I guess it works, but you lose that sort of idea that the thief's abilities are like almost supernatural. But anyway, that's
that's just something that, having played D&D for years, that I've always heard people complain about. Different.
Oh yeah, I get that. I mean, I'm running Gods Forbidden North using the Rule Cyclopedia, and our thief, he's still alive. So he's like 6 or 7 level at this point, and he's still alive, and he's been playing really smart. Probably because he was in my Lamentations of Elemental Evil campaign for 3 years, so he knows he got trial by fire in that campaign, but. When it first started out, he's just like, I only have a 15% chance to hide. I'm like, yep. But I did house rule a few things to make things a little because in BX and Rule Cyclopedia, there's no modifications. You are on that chart, so you're not going to get any higher than a 15% or 20% at the first level. Whereas in like second edition, there were modifications based on your dexterity,
armor you're wearing, and then the points you spend.
Yeah, and then and like what race you are, like elves got a bonus or something. But so what I did was I house rolled a few things, like depending on what stat, I split it up. It wasn't just dexterity, but like if you had a high intelligence, I think it was, you can add a 5% per plus, per whatever modifier to was it read languages or something like that, you know what I mean? Like, so dexterity, you move silently, would get a +5 per bonus to dexterity, so that way, it would create, so it would give you a little bit of a bonus, a bump at first level. But no, he was just like, oh my god, only a 15%. Can we? He preferred the way Lamentations did it, because he would get
a minimum 17%.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then you add 1 pip, and all of a sudden you're at 33%. You know what I mean? And then so he or whatever it would be, 35, something like that. But
it's roughly 33. It's a little off, but it's roughly 33 because it's like 16.7%, I think, per every based on 6.
Yes, yeah. So. But yeah, I found that kind of humorous when he's like, he'd rather play a Lamentation specialist. But no, I've heard that criticism. But I've become very, I don't want to say rules as written type guy, but I think a lot of these systems have proven their worth, that they've stood that test of time. So I'm very hesitant to modify or completely replace.
Yes.
So,
but it's the reason some of these game companies in recent years have created one massive system and just shoved everything into it, even with some modifications.
Yeah.
So, like Fria Liga, outside of Dragonbane, everything is done in the Year Zero engine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of some form. Modifius, all of Modifius's games at this point are some variant on the 2D20 system.
Yeah, and that's an interesting system. I played it for the first time at VentureCon. Someone ran Dune, 2D20 Dune, and I was like, I freaking loved it. It's one of those games where I wouldn't call it complex. I think it could get complex. I mean, I've only a very superficial understanding of the game. But once you kind of understand how the
Yeah.
momentum system works and
Mhm.
how determining what you're rolling, because
Mhm.
you have your skills and your attributes, and they kind of color how the scene's going to play out. Uh, it's awesome. Like I had such a blast. Like I have some of the Modifius Conan stuff, and I've been wanting to play it, but it's just not something
Yeah.
we really have talked about. But now after playing Dune, I'm like,
Yeah.
I want to try
Yeah.
Modifius Conan now.
Um, so Conan's a little more complex than Dune is. It's an earlier version of the 2D20 system, and it's a little more fleshed out.
Yeah,
I've actually played Conan. I really like Conan. It's a fun little game. The Doom pool and stuff is a lot of fun. If you're not a meta currency fan, the 2D20 system can bug the crap out of you.
yeah,
But
sure,
it's a fun game. It's a really fun game.
yeah.
They're really fun games. But the idea being is that what they did is they found a rule set that worked, and they just like started using it rather than trying to rewrite the rules for every game.
Yo, yeah, no, well, it also helps with brand identity. Like I now know what it is to play a Modifius game. You
Mhm.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something I want to do more of because it was just fun. It was like a lot of fun. Like one of the guys at the table was laughing at me because he's like, "You're so locked in. You're like locked in." Because I was like in character, trying to fly this ship that was like transporting spice across Arrakis, and we're getting shot at by the Harkonian. It was awesome, and I had to make a deal with the Fremen. It was freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And that's a testament to the game. And again, it was like simple enough for me for the very
Mhm.
first time to like pick it up and just have a blast with it at a gaming convention. And again, but that's me. Like I like something that's a little bit more on the simpler side in terms of complexity. And I don't want to make it sound like rules like games or lighter, simpler games or not engaging. I mean, the complexity can arise from something like those games through play as like you're doing something crazy like, oh, I'm going to swing from the chandelier. Well, there's no rules for it, right? Well, what does that mean? Well, that's where you get your rulings over rules um,
Mhm.
mantra. And the game can start to add to complexity can add to the game, but that's based purely on
Mhm.
emergent play with your players. And I think that, to me, is more satisfying than grabbing 1,500 pages of rules and trying to digest as much of it as you can just to try
Yeah.
to go into just to go into a ruined cavern or a ruined keep to fight whatever's in there. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to grab my dice and go. So
Well, that's how a lot of people are, and especially at conventions. I've seen people try to introduce more complex games at conventions, and then they spend half the time trying to explain the game, and they're just
yep,
like, it's not fun to play that way at a
yeah,
convention.
yeah.
Um, I'll tell you a game system that uh, it actually has a deceptive level of complexity to it, considering the mechanic is so simple, and that's a ubiquity system that was used in Hollow Earth.
Hmm.
So it's a 50-50 pass fail system. You can use any dice you want. You can even flip coins if you want, because it's a simple pass fail system. So if you're rolling dice, an odd is a fail and even is a pass. So it doesn't matter what dice you're rolling because there's always a 50% chance you're going to fail or pass,
Okay.
no matter what, because it's not about the number of faces or any of that. It's because theoretically it does still matter because like a D20 has more even faces than a D4, yada yada, but you still only have a 50% chance to hit the even face, no
Hmm.
matter what. But it's a very unique system and its complexity that it takes that very simple concept of pass fail and really explodes it out and makes a really good game. I've actually considered running some Desolation,
Hmm.
which is their post-apoc fantasy,
Uh-huh.
and I played it before. I really like Desolation. Desolation is the game that introduced to me that I kid you not. In Desolation, every player character has a nutrition value, so that if somebody dies, you can eat them.
That's cool. I actually, when I was tinkering around trying to see if I can make like a Lamentations version of Dark Sun, uh, I wanted to include rules for cannibalism, because you got cannibal halflings and stuff, right?
Yes.
Um, but this this would actually have to be a separate stat, I think. But basically, every time you eat a sapient creature,
Yep.
you would get an increased chance of contracting kuru, which is that brain disease that people get. Cannibals actually end up getting, where it's like a neurological disorder. You see this a lot in the Aboriginal tribes who do like sacrifices and cannibalistic sacrifices. There was actually a great scene in that movie, Denzel Washington movie. It's that post-apocalyptic one where he's blind and he's got the Bible.
Book of Eli.
Yeah, Book of Eli. They go into they find some house, and these old couples there, and they're all like, "Hey, you want to have some steak?" And they notice the old couple's hands are shaking, and they're like, "Uh-oh, these guys are cannibals,"
Yep.
So yeah, anyway, I wanted to incorporate Kuru rules. I thought that would be kind of fun. It would have to be like this mechanic, like every time you eat, you get a point, and then each point correlates to maybe a 5% chance or something, and then you just have to roll, but it's cumulative. So eventually, you're going to get it.
Yeah.
So
like I said, I'm just, as far as rules complexity goes, it's amazing how you can take very simple mechanics and make them more complex.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, so many people get into the idea that complexity. Some misconceptions. Just real quick, kind of changing gears a little bit. Complexity often is confused for things like book length or, uh, you know, the complexity of the die rolling system or whatever. That's not necessarily what makes a game complex. Because, like I said, you can use a very basic mechanic and make it complex. Shadowrun itself is a good example of that. Shadowrun is mechanically not that complex. It's a 4, 5, or a 6 is a success, period, on every die. What makes Shadowrun complex is how they take that mechanic and expand it into how rules work, how your limits work, and your physical limit and all that kind of stuff works, and the damage track and all the other fun stuff that Shadowrun uses. But at its heart, Shadowrun's base mechanic is not that complicated. You pick up a number of d6, you roll them, you're looking for 4 graders.
Yeah. No, it's well, you mentioned Free League, depending on what IP you're running with their system, it can be really easy, like and simple, like Vossen. I mean, you ran a Vossen game for me, which was a lot of fun, and that was very simple, for the most part. But then when you crack open Forbidden Lands, that gets really complicated, like deceptively so. Like I didn't expect it to be as complicated, because there's all these exceptions to the rules. There's exceptions to the rules, but then there's exceptions to the exception. It is like, honestly, it's like reading a freaking statute or a law book. I'm just like, oh my god.
I don't know. Have you ever played the original Mutant Year Zero?
No.
So Mutant Year Zero is really deceptively simple too. It's a lot of fun. I like Mutant Year Zero. We actually ran Gene Lab Alpha, and we were playing Mutant Rabbits.
Oh, right on.
Which actually led to one of my favorite lines from any RPG at any point in history. One of the player characters grabbed another player character and slapped him because he was freaking out. He fell to roll and he started freaking out. And he slapped the character and he goes, "Who's damn it, man? Think of your 1,000 kids back and wife back at home."
That's funny.
So it's deceptively complicated, though. It's deceptively complicated in how it plays, because you see the base mechanic, you roll a d6 pull, you're looking for 6s.
Yeah.
But again, they build out that system to where they add exceptions to that roll. They add, all these situational things, and how it affects how many dice you roll and all that kind of stuff. And the next thing you know, you have this game that mechanically on its face is super simple, but plays a lot more complicated. And it's good. To me, that's good. It means that's a sign of good game design to me. If you can take a simple concept and make it functional in all circumstances, that's good game design to me.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And that's one of the things I think I've been saying this a lot lately, and I'll say it again. I think Free League is a dark horse in the race for game supremacy. When 4E came out, right, and people were like, "What is this? This isn't D&D." And Paizo was like, "Yep, we're running with the Pathfinder, a version of third edition." And they kind of, for a while, they were like selling better than D&D, right? I don't know if Free League will get to that level, but Paizo certainly has fallen by the wayside with second edition Pathfinder. No one seems to really dig 2024 fifth edition 5.5, right? But Free League has just been, they have such a great system that they can easily tweak to something more complex like Forbidden Lands, or something really straightforward and simple like Vossen. Alien RPG is pretty straightforward and simple, and that's a hell of a lot of fun. I played that.
One day you're going to have to run me in a game of that, because I do have the second, or the reimagined edition of it, the updated edition of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't back that because I'm like, what my only complaint with Free League is, like, I don't understand their choice in presenting the rules. Sometimes it's really hard to find something. It's like, why it just seems counterintuitive,
I legitimately believe that comes from them being Swedish.
Yeah, you think so?
It's being Swedish and the translation of the game.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see that. So, but yeah, I love that company. Love that company.
Well, one of the great things with Free League, if just as a side note for anyone watching this, if you are looking for an alternative to D&D in general, Free League is a great place to go, because Free League offers worlds from post-apocalypse and Mutant Year Zero to horror and Vossen to hex crawling and Forbidden Lands to pure fantasy and Dragonbane, or if you want to call it by its original name, Demon o Drakor, Demon or Dragon.
Yeah.
Demon and Dragon. How it got the name Dragonbane in America, I have no clue.
I have a feeling lawyers were involved, but
me too. And probably some English translators were like, "Yeah, Americans don't really buy things that scream demon."
Well, I have a feeling because the easy D&D logo that would follow, they're like, no, this is
I would agree with that. But if you play, but they offer games in every line you can imagine. And then within their lines, even within their post-apoc line, there are several different ways to play Mutant Year Zero. You can play as mutated humans. You can play mutated animals. You can play robots. You can play on Elysium, which is this like utopian space station. And they're just a great company. And I think they have, as a smaller press company, they have unlocked not just the rules part of it. I think they have unlocked. Let me add Atmos in here now that he's decided to join us. They've unlocked the ability to understand how to produce product too, and that they don't overproduce.
Yeah.
Each of their games gets like 2 books a year,
right?
If that.
Yeah. So I don't know. Anyway, yeah, no, I think they do a nice job. So
yeah, they're on my.
People should definitely check them out. So, what's up, Atmos?
I'm sorry I'm late. I got the time off. I thought it was noon my time, not Eastern.
Yeah. We understand. You don't love us. It's okay.
Don't do that. You talked about Alternity being like a medium crunch game.
Yeah.
I Do you agree? Just because of the fact, even though there's a crap ton of skills, you just put ranks in, similar to like a Traveler.
Yep.
Which makes it easier to parse.
Yep. I have to also give Alternity props on the fact that skill advancement is not so fast that you can't get onto it. And I saw your private chat there, Matt. So if you need to head off, dude, take it easy.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't want to interrupt the conversation, but yeah,
no, you're good.
But yeah, thanks for having me on, man. It was fun.
Me and Atmos will wrap this up, and
sounds good, man.
What's going on, bud?
Take it easy, guys. Man.
So, did you guys talk about like the barrier to entry when it comes to more complex systems compared to simple ones?
We haven't hit that area yet. We were talking about kind of what it means and how they interact and what's good about them and all that. That's actually a good segue into that. The barrier to entry is again, I'll do what I did with Matt. I'll say kind of what I feel. Feel free afterwards to add whatever you need to add. Complex games, they do have a higher entry to barrier to entry for me. It's harder to find players for games that even appear complex because people see all the math or whatever and it scares them a little bit, which is one of the reasons I'm a medium crunch guy. I like games that are kind of medium crunch because you can kind of get people to jump in on them. But the barrier to entry for rules light can also be a little high because of the fact that so many rules light games don't have rules for a lot of situations and a lot of circumstances. So what you wind up getting, unfortunately, is you wind up getting people that get a little scared of the fact that, well, there's not a rule for my character and I kind of want to do this with them. And you're like, yeah, but we can make that rule up. We can make that judgment at the table. But it can scare certain players to not have that fallback of having a rule in place.
So,
good.
So I'm a rules light guy. I went from playing Megton Zeta, Megton, and going into the OSR specifically because the rules were a lot easier and quicker to understand. So you could teach a game of rules like game in like 5 minutes. If you're comparing it to like Palladium, you got to read these sadly very poorly laid out basically technical manuals, and I feel that actually causes players to have issues with it because you're putting the way I'm trying to describe this is for complex game systems, you're moving a lot of the work from the GM to the player in particular, because you're having the players do all the simulation aspects of the complex rules. In rules like games, all that work goes to the GM. So it's a double-edged sword because like when you think rules light, it's going to be easy for the players, not necessarily so much for the GM. You put a lot more work into it and that aspect. If you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's actually an interesting point because when you talk about barrier to entry, you tend to talk about the barrier to entry on the player side, but there is a barrier to entry in overly complex games for the GM because the GM is expected to know the rules. They're expected to know how the game plays before you sit down. And if you've got a really complex rule set, there's going to be games out there that some people just won't touch because they're complicated. They're hard to learn. You mentioned Mecton Zeta. Mecton Zeta, it requires a lot of the GM.
Yes.
It really does.
It uses decimals, and you have to multiply decimals and shit. I actually, I actually have notes in particular towards this because it's a bit ridiculous. A 6 kill. So you measure things in kills, and different sizes of things would be like 25 kills. But for like a 6 kill beam weapon with a modified range of like +2 accuracy and unlimited shots requires you to calculate 9 times 1.5 times 1 times 0.88, which equals to 11.88, which you round up to 11.9. Now, Mekton Zeta in particular, the reason why I was able to run it so long is it's one of those games where it's easy on the players, but it's just really hard to make things for in-game universe. You probably know I used my avatar from Armor Trooper Voltums. I had to steer my mecha game to basically mass produce units. So I have a base unit, and then players can make slight modifications to your unit. I don't know how anyone would be able to run a Gundam game or something like that with vastly different sizes and armaments.
Yes. Yeah, you get into that's a world of hurt if you're the GM. So I'm going to share a screen, and this is just an example of something that you have to, you're not going to memorize this table, but you're going to need to reference it. So you're going to want it somewhere handy. And it is the 2-hit table from Anima, going back to Anima. This is the combat table for Anima Beyond Fantasy. So the way that this game works when you hit is you roll, your opponent rolls his defense, and then you calculate the difference based on the armor type they're wearing.
How the hell does it look worse than Rollmaster? What the hell am I looking at?
It's based pretty heavily off Rollmaster. So,
oh my god.
So, say you've got a guy with armor type 4, and you beat the opponent by 100 points. You'll do 60% of your base damage to the opponent, life points.
That's crazy.
And so this right here, this table right here, not only can scare players, this can scare GMs from a perspective of trying to run combats, because they're like, oh god, I got to reference a table now. Yeah, got to reference a table. And I mean it. And there's a calculated. Good thing is they have a calculated damage table for you, which is pretty nice. That like tells you based on 10s. So if you have a base damage of 10 at 60%, you do 6 damage. But
would you consider Anima to be like Chartmaster, aka Rollmaster? Is it all charts?
It is heavily influenced by Rollmaster. Not all charts though. It's not like your skills and stuff aren't done on charts. Just combat. Just combat is done on the chart. This is actually something that when they did the second edition, they got rid of all of this. But the second edition is not available anywhere outside of like either France or Spain. So you literally cannot pick up you can't pick up a copy of it unless you speak those languages.
Yeah. So when it comes to, I guess, complex systems like Alternity, how difficult is it to create like NPCs, monsters, and whatnot? Because I know you upload some of the tasks to the players because of its medium density, but
not hard.
Okay, because I have
basically all you need is their baseline stats, their combat action score, and then any key stats that they would regularly, like any key skills they would regularly use.
So it's actually easier to read than the actual character sheets because you have all the skills listed even though you don't have them.
Yeah. So like, and then realistically, you don't even have to write out all the numbers. Like, so if I'm writing out an NPC and I want them to have, say, investigate, right? I'll say, oh, they have investigate at 15. And I can do the calculations in my head of the other numbers because I know that a good result is half of that and an amazing result is a quarter of 15 rounded down. So it's fairly simple to do. Most games I run, creating enemies is not hard. They're even systems like Fabula Ultima, which has a full monster creation system. It's pretty much step by step. It has like a step by step guidelines on how to do it, so it's not very complicated. And thank God they just dropped the bestiary because there's sample monsters in there that you can use to like and adjust if you want to if you want to take an orc and make him a hobgoblin or something. It'd be easy enough to do. But They took 2 years to do it, but they did it. But yeah, like I said, that's a barrier to entry for the GM, though. You know, monster creation, NPC creation is a definite barrier to entry for GMs. A good example, you used a good example earlier, is Palladium NPCs tend to be more fleshed out than a lot of games. You need a lot of stats and stuff for your NPCs in Palladium.
It gets a little bit ridiculous too, though.
Yeah, it can.
Like, you familiar with the going through my notes? I took notes on some of the more crazy stuff from Palladium. Do you know about mega damage capacity?
Yes. Rifts is an NPC world.
That rivals the kills for Mecton Zeta, and it's a little bit ridiculous.
It can be, and it's very complicated. I mean, I'll give you a system that can be a little scary the first time you encounter it as a storyteller. Anyways, is the World of Darkness damage system from Old World of Darkness, Classic World of Darkness. The damage system in the original game, it can take a little bit to get your head around, because you have bashing, lethal, you have your bashing, then you have your lethal, then you have your aggravated, and then you have your resistance, and if you're playing werewolves, you get rage back and all this other fun stuff. So that system itself can be very much something that when you're reading it, you kind of have to wrap your head around it. You can't just do it on the fly like with a hit point system.
Do you think complex systems tend to gear towards changing how the story plays out, specifically with players will spend more time building up their character and looking at their character sheet compared to like a rules light system where you're more basically follow, because your character sheet tends to be very limited, you'd be able to pay attention to more of the world?
In a generic sense, yes, but I think that's a player issue more than anything. In that, if you have good players who are very experienced at role playing, they tend not to do that. Um, they're cognizant of their numbers, but they still play their character the way that they envision their character, and they try to build their skills and talents and all that stuff around what they're envisioning their character to be. That's something I've always run into. Uh, that the idea of the munchkin to me um, is not real common, because I play with a lot of guys that have been playing for a long time. So we all cut our teeth before the idea of character builds and stuff was a thing.
What I'm trying to describe is basically it's like Shadow the Demon Lord, Lancer, Pathfinder 2E is probably one of the heaviest crunchy games I've run across. And those games specifically, the players are more worried about like what they're going to spec into, what they're going to multi-class into, more than they're more immersed in the game world in particular.
Like I said, I don't run into that often, surprisingly, because the guys that I play with, they tend to be old school guys. So they'll think about it, but they don't tend to think about it in game. They tend to think about it out of game, especially when they get close to like gaining a level or getting close to be able to take a prestige class in like Pathfinder or whatever. They don't, when they're in game, they're thinking about their character in game. So my experience with that is a little less than some people's probably is. But I do, on the theoretical, you're absolutely right. That is, complex games can lead to that, because a lot of complex games tend to use a lot of numbers, tend to use a lot of bonuses and all that kind of stuff. So you're constantly there's the potential to constantly be focused on how do I get the biggest bonus and all that kind of stuff. And if you're not experienced, especially as a player, uh, you're going to play the role playing game more like a board game rather than a immersive experience.
So I'm one of the I'm probably the oldest person in my play groups around my area,
Yeah.
and the younger people, uh, they will treat RPGs very similarly to
Mm.
Western action RPGs, where you
Yeah.
have the multiple skill trees, like Path of Exile.
Mm. Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. And
the character build role playing play style is not necessarily an experience; it's an actual play style that people get
yeah.
locked into.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's why I think we're kind of talking past each other a little bit on that. I am admitting that I do see that with newer players, especially in complex systems. But my personal experience at the table has not been to experience that as much because the guys I play with or I have played with in the past, for the most part, are very experienced role players. So they're more involved in the immersive storytelling part of the game than they are the mechanics. Uh, but from a theoretical standpoint, you're absolutely correct. Where that can be a problem with complex rule sets, where people start looking at the when instead of looking at playing a character, they're looking at playing a build. They're looking at playing for the next talent in the talent tree, or the next prestige class or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely correct on that. That's definitely a problem that can arise out of as you add more complexity. Um, you or add I wouldn't even say complexity. I think as you add more features that you can take, it can become more common. One of the ways to avoid that in a rule set is to really kind of limit your ability to take features, either by like a good example is Mythcraft, right? Mythcraft has almost unlimited features. I mean, you've looked at the book, you played the game, you basically have unlimited options, right? From a pure theoretical standpoint. But the way that you gain talents purposely limits your ability to abuse them.
It all so that may be theoretically true, but I feel
Yeah.
like expansive character sheets, players will
Mm.
spend more time trying to figure out what they can do and trying to figure out what skills they have and
Mm.
how to tally all that up to make a roll. Now, the
Mm.
reason why I originally brought it up is because the issue with rules light systems that I've run
Mm.
across called analysis paralysis.
Mm.
Or did you ever heard of Mother May I?
Yes, yes. That's actually there's been some more recent videos been made about that concept of Mother May I player, because they have so many options, they get paralyzed, and then they're like, "Can I do this?" Instead of just saying,
Yeah.
"I want to do this."
The reason why I like White Hack is because there's class, the Strong,
Mm.
that's designed specifically for people that really need a foundation because
Mm.
they maybe they can't improvise on the fly. Maybe they're
Yeah.
either new to the games or they're just used
Yeah.
to more complex
Mm.
systems.
Yeah.
You basically get the equivalent of feats. Also,
Mm.
you have the loot ability that allows you to, instead of having to come up on the fly, because magic is or miracles in general are free
Mhm.
form. Maybe they
Mm.
can't think on the fly, or they could just get
Yeah.
paralyzed because they
Yeah.
don't know how to choose. They will loot
Um,
from
yeah.
enemies with their keywords. So I'll be able
Well,
to
yeah.
give them ones that
Yeah.
will work well for their character that
Uh,
way.
I'll give you two games that I've run into Mother May I in, as people were learning them. Ars Magica and Mage the Ascension,
Those are
because of the
complex
free.
systems.
And they are. But the reason I ran into Mother May I in those games is because people are so used to RPGs where all the spells are pre-spelled out for them and preordained, that when they get the ability to do anything they want, they're like, wait, well, can I really do that? well, you can certainly try. Doesn't mean you're going to succeed, but you can try it. And
I,
it paralyzes them because they're like, oh my God, there's just so many options.
what I usually do in that type of situation is I ask them, "What do you want to do?" and we'll work this out. Like, don't ask me, "Can I do this?" Tell me what you're going to do, and I can basically work with you to figure out like what's going to happen.
Seth Skorkowski did a video on the Mother May I thing, and he said that he actually said, they said the way to get your players to commit to actions is not ask them what they want to do, but say, what are you doing? Not what do you want to do, not any variation of that. What are you doing? The terminology of how you ask that question in play is important. How you actually ask that question is actually kind of important. So, and if you haven't watched that video from Seth Skorkowski, I would really encourage you to watch it. It's really good
Yeah.
because he does a really good job talking about the Mother May I, players taking forever in a turn because they get paralyzed or they don't really know what they want to do or they don't know what they can do. And if you put it to them directly, what are you doing? Don't tell me what you want to do. What are you doing is a lot different, and it's really interesting. I had never thought of it that way again because my experience is that I play with people who kind of already know how to play games, so they generally are like you're in a lot of my games. At most, you know this. Most of the time when you guys are playing with me, the guy behind you in turn order is thinking about what he's going to do on his turn based on the
Uh,
actions in front of him. Generally,
I'd
not
rather
always, but
players
generally.
think of what they can do as a group
Mm.
compared to just thinking singularly what they're going to do because
Yes.
they might do things
Yep.
out of order
Yes, very
or
good.
yeah. Like let me give you an example of like say like a party is crossing a rope bridge over like a
Mhm.
deep gorge. Halfway
Yep.
across it gives way
Mhm.
because an enemy archer starts shooting from
Yep.
the far side. How
Mhm.
would you describe a light system? How that would um resolve that
Um,
situation?
so like, there's two systems that come to mind immediately in that for me: Dragon Warriors, and then BX or Beckme, either one, whichever way you want to go. And in Beckme BX, I would just treat it as a dexterity check,
Yeah.
a group dexterity check. Everyone in
So
a group takes a
basically,
dexterity check.
what you're trying to say is like players, you
Yep.
tell them, well, they start describing their actions. I cut the ropes on our
Mhm.
side, so it swings to the far bank. I grab
Yep.
the fighter and we go jump for the ledge. I studied the bridge with the
Mhm.
grappling hook. You just say a whole bunch of shit, right? And then
Yeah.
the GM calls a
Yep.
couple ability checks or saves.
Yep.
If the game has advantage or disadvantage, you could throw that in, and you
Yep.
resolve the whole sequence in like a minute. And the focus will
And
focus
what I was
on
going
the
to say.
fiction and the risk.
Yep. Well, and that's what I was going to say about Dragon Warriors. So Dragon Warriors, you have your evasion score, right?
Yeah.
And what I would do in that case in Dragon Warriors is I would assign it a speed at which the bridge would be collapsing around you, and you would just roll your evasion. You tell me how you're avoiding it. That's fine. You'd be like, oh, okay, we're going to cut the ropes, we're going to jump, we're going to run across whatever. And then I'm going to say, okay, well, it's coming at you at speed 8, -8 from your evasion, make the roll on 2d10.
So if you compare that to a heavy system, like and just as an example, uh, players will have to look at their action economy and their available
Mm-hmm.
reactions. Someone
Yep.
asked about the exact athletics uh, difficulty
Yep.
dice to leap or
Yep.
climb, whether the bridge counts as difficult terrain or if cutting ropes is an
Yep.
interaction action or requires a check.
Yep.
Whether an
Yep.
archer's attack triggers an opportunity attacks or reactions, or how
Mm-hmm.
falling damage calculated from this height. There's just too
Yep.
much crap there,
Yep.
and
Yeah,
it
it's
just
too
takes too
much.
long.
Yes.
And I
Which is
noticed you
that's why
once
I'm
you
not a
start,
huge heavy crunch guy.
yeah, but that is offloaded onto the players, unless
Yes.
you have experienced players who like that. If a little bit of autism there, it will slow
Yeah,
the game down.
yeah. Well, and I don't know if you caught me and Matt talking about when you run certain types of super crunch games, like Rollmaster, or even a game like Hero System, which isn't necessarily super crunchy. If you're running a game that's perceived to be very heavy, you're going to get a very particular type of player. And in the case of a game like what a situation what you're talking about, you're going to have players that want to do that kind of number crunching and all that kind of stuff. Generally, if you're in a heavy system, um, most players. So something that I've discovered, most players do not fall into pure rules light or pure complex rules. They kind of fall in the middle. They like games that have some level of complexity, but aren't so complex that they overload the player, kind of thing. The game systems that I'm thinking here would be things like um, Vossen, Dragonbane, uh, Mythcraft kind of falls in that category. Um, games like that. Games that would fall into the rules complex would be 3.5 Pathfinder, Rollmaster, anything like that. And then rules light would be something like White Hack. DX is kind of rules light, a little more rules light. So most players though they fall in that middle category of what I would what I would call rules medium, where there's enough rules to cover most situations, but it gives enough leeway where the GM can adjudicate and also doesn't push a lot of the weight back off onto the player to
Yeah.
know like all the circumstantial bonuses and all that crap.
So,
Good.
when it comes to like rules light and like the crunch and how people talk about like you can't have long campaigns with like lighter systems. Lighter systems are deceptively complex because
Yes, they
all the
are.
work is done by the player. Example, Age of Blood of Iron by Doc Flamingo.
Mhm.
It's basically a very modified version of like a Traveler with a 2d6, but like
Mhm.
it has expanded modifiers in it.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I have to be honest, Doc took care of all the heavy lifting. All
Mhm.
we had to do to enjoy the game was roll 2d6.
Mhm. Mhm.
He has awesome
Uh,
mass combat rules, and he
yeah.
took care of all the armor. When you crit, chooses a body part on the creature or
Mhm.
humanoid's body and stuff like that. He took care of that
Mhm.
all behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And when you see him on stream, he has like multiple books open and he's looking left and right. And
Mhm.
there has to be something said about the fact that just because you have like a 300-page book, when
Mhm.
with rules light, like if you want to figure out how much a Spanish galleon weighs, you can
Mhm.
look that up on Wikipedia and throw it in your game. You don't
Yeah.
have to have the
Yeah.
rules there in a
Yeah.
supplement.
No. Yeah. Like I said, I agree with all that. That's why I'm not. Most of the games I run are not super rules heavy. I'll tell you a game that shifts a lot to the GM, but is deceptively complex and has a lot of player option or player choice is Fabiola Ultima.
I
The
heard about that.
Yeah, well, so the GM does a lot of the bonuses and stuff, and a lot of the situational stuff is on the GM, but the players get a lot of say in establishing those situational uh, modifiers and stuff. They can spend Fabiola points to like add things to the environment if they need it, all kinds of cool things. They actually have a meta currency that lets them do that kind of stuff. So players do get a lot of options in the game, but it's not directly put on them to constantly be the ones to uh, you know always be on fire and know all the different what feats do you have and all that. No, no. all you really need for Fabio Ultima is, because the way that the classes work, the class abilities work, is they're generic enough to where when you take them, uh, you don't really need to remember a lot, because most of them give static effects. So, for example, one of the classes in the book, they have a class feature that allows them to block for nearby friendlies. So all you have to remember is oh yeah, I have. So say your wizard is about to get whacked by a goblin, right, and he's going to die. You can be like, hey, I have that talent. Lets me block for him. Okay, simple. All the player has to remember is the most basic parts of the game. And like I said, but with the Ultima points, it allows them to put things back into the GM's court that maybe he didn't think of. So a good example would be like, say you're getting ready to fall off of a cliff, right? And your character tumbles off the edge. If you have Ultima points, you can be like, hey, halfway down, there's a tree branch hanging down. I'm going to try to grab onto.
Nice.
And you can do that. A game that's kind of the opposite of that, and it puts a lot onto the players, but it's kind of a neat way to do it. I like that it does it. Is Exalted, especially Exalted Third. Their stunt system in that game, what they do, so they encourage you to be as cinematic in your description when you attack as possible. So if you just say, okay, I'm swinging my sword at the opponent, you're not getting any stunt dice. Because you got to remember, this is like superhero wushu combat. So what they want you to do is like describe kicking off of a rock on the nearby ground, diving overhead with your sword in both hands, and coming down with a swing aimed at the head of the opponent. But unfortunately, it puts a lot of onus on the player.
Yes. Do you think what's this term? Do you think complex heavy rules is a safety net for the GM?
That's a yes and a no question for me. I think it is in the right amount. If you have a good set of rules, like complex rules that cover the most like common circumstances, absolutely. But you can get so bad into it that like you start getting rules for like pissing in the spread of Christianity. And like that's not helpful to the GM at all. Because he's got to parse through like so much just to find like a circumstantial rule. But it is good to have some level of circumstantial rules, in most cases. Like I said, it's one of the reasons I'm not a huge rules light guy, because rules light puts all the onus on the GM to make up on the fly those circumstantial rules. Whereas if you've got a little bit of complexity, you can be like, okay, yeah, but the rulebook says, like I said, again, Dragon Warriors evasion rules are a great example. It doesn't have to be complex.
So a lot of these rules light games, there's a reason why they're called referees. Mm-hmm. You have to stay consistent.
Yes.
You gotta remember your rulings. You don't have to write it in stone, but you have to remember them, because if you don't have consistency, the players will think that what's the term for you don't want to seem arbitrary.
Yes.
Because then that's like the worst possible thing in a rules light game, is if players think the GM is just messing with you and is just fudging with basically how the game.
Well, and I was going to say the other end of that is it can create resentment among the players if you start looking like you're playing favorites with one person, because you keep Well, because if you
One of the
go ahead.
go
To
continue,
say if
continue.
you create a rolling that constantly seems to benefit one player, and you're not doing it on purpose necessarily, but it just every time you make a rolling, it benefits one player or disadvantages another player in some way, then everyone's going to start going, why is he disadvantaging player X or favoring player Y so much? So you got to be careful about that too.
I've seen it from like well-meaning
Mhm.
GMs where the only method of running a game is
Mhm.
railroad, and it'll get to the point where players will recognize that whatever they do, um, it seems not to matter,
Yep. Yep.
and you got to
Mhm.
remind people have to be reminded that this is a
Mhm.
game, this is not a novel.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and rules rules heavy games are easier to railroad, I think, than rules light, uh, because the rules themselves, unfortunately, uh, dictate a lot of the action. Uh, when you have hard like a really tight hard rule for you know uh, using your example of getting off of a bridge, you have really hard tight rules for using athletics and acrobatics, for example, right? uh, it can feel like you're railroading them because your players are like, well, why can't I do blank, blank, and blank? Or why can't I do it the way I want to do it? Well, because the rules say you can only use acrobatics this way. That gets into the whole raw versus rye and all that kind of stuff. Rules is written versus rules is intended. And that's a whole separate argument.
Yeah. So I was in this really badass
Mhm.
Hyperborea game run by a guy that basically put a lot of effort into his games and stuff. And he liked OSR, but he also likes Hyperborea. And early in the game, this is not his fault. This let me finish
Mhm.
because this is going to get a little weird. I would do stuff like any other OSR
Mhm.
player. I would like dip my weapons into weird substances in the ground. If I find a potion, I take a little drop of it, put it on my tongue, and
Mhm.
taste it. And that in particular allowed me to do it at first in the session because he thought it was
Yep.
cool. Later on, towards the end of the session, he pulls me aside. It's like I went and looked. Uh, I can't let you do that anymore because there are rules for alchemy and stuff. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
So
That's what I was saying.
yeah,
When you
like,
start when the rules start limiting your ability to tell a story, then the rules are probably too complex.
but this is Hyperborea. People love
Yep.
Hyperborea. Um, it's just when it like it's when it comes to rules light systems where basically you have a occupation, so you have a class and you have like an occupation,
Hmm.
you could very easily go through the game world and be able to say my character would probably know something about this or be able to do something about
Hmm.
that compared to basically trying
Yep.
to min
Yep.
max stats
Yep.
to make sure you're at least
Yep.
decent
Well,
something.
and like I said, and some of my favorite games, the rules that do exist are hard and tight, but they also have some flexibility in how they're applied. The rules themselves, when they're applied, are hard. They're very tight, but how you apply those rules to circumstances is open to interpretation. Again, going back to Dragon Warriors is a great example. Uh, how you know, when you're trying to get out of the way of something, uh, the rules are really, really, really well written for evasion, and you have the evasion score and all that, and that's good. But like how you apply that is so open to interpretation. When do you apply the evasion rule? Well, basically, the rule book basically says anytime speed is a factor to get out of the way or to avoid damage in some way, that's when you would apply it, which is very open to interpretation. So that can be anything from a rock falling off of a cliff on top of you to you needing to dodge out of the way of a trap to getting off of a bridge that's being shot at by archers. All of those things apply that same rule. And they're three totally different circumstances. mechanically. They're all or story wise, they're all three different circumstances. Mechanically, though, they're all one role,
Yep.
which makes it
Um.
a lot easier to deal with.
So when it comes, so I have to bring this up. Would you agree that like, r- so rules definitely slow things down, but they also like provide grip for players to hold on to
Mhm.
for the world you're in.
Yep.
And say like if you have too loose of
Mhm.
rules, the world just feels like ephemeral and players,
Yep.
can't grasp certain things
Yes.
when it gets too light.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about that's why I'm rules medium GM. I like rules medium because if it's too light, I feel like I have to do a ton of work. If it's too rules crunchy, I feel like the rules get in the way. So I like a game where it's like, okay, I can really adjust the rules as I need to. Um, or the rule is so easy to interpret that it doesn't require players to worry about it. I'm actually a lot like you, where I don't like putting the onus on the player a lot, or of the onus of knowing the game on the player, anyways. When you sit down at a table, for me, uh, the only rules that you should seriously be worried about as a player are the rules that apply to your character, predominantly. So, like, if you're playing a wizard, even in White Hack, right? You're playing a wizard, right? You should understand
Yep.
how the magic system in White Hack works.
Not true, because a wizard's not a class. A wizard's a profession.
What?
You could be a strong
Yeah,
wizard, a deft
yeah,
wizard, a wise wizard. You got to understand how the magic system
yeah,
works. But
yeah,
anybody could use the scrolls
yeah.
as long as they have an affiliation with like a mage guild, for
But
instance.
the
But
point
yeah,
stands, if you're going to try to use a magic scroll and you don't understand how magic scrolls work as a player, you know, so you really kind of have to understand. You should understand what your character's capable of. I think that's a misnomer that I've heard GMs. I've had some GMs, not recently. I've heard it in the past though. Say, well, players should know the full rule book. No, absolutely, that's not their job. It's your job as the GM. You should know how things work.
even with white hack, even with white hack in particular, if you have a scroll, it actually will tell you what it actually does, how much the HP cost it does to cast
Mhm.
it. Uh, for the wise character, where they basically triangulate their keywords to their
Mhm.
profession, that's where it gets
Yeah,
hard. So, like, magic is simple for everyone except for the
yeah.
wise.
But my point still stands. If you're reading a spell description and you don't understand how the baseline mechanic behind that spell description works, then you're just lost as a player.
Yeah.
You still need to understand. So, like, even on the fly, um, if you pick up a magic item, for example, and it does something to your character, you need to at some point sit down with your character and understand what that magic item does for your character. You should, yeah.
So, in ru
So,
in Rules Light, it requires, quite a bit of
mm,
improv to, make it work, and there are players who are not skilled at
mm,
improvisation, and crunchy systems will literally give them, like, a clear skeleton for
yep,
like what their options are, what they can do for
yep,
the story. And it's not a
yep,
bad thing to not really good at
mm,
improv. And those players will lean on, say, in White Hack, the strong class or any type of
yep,
system that basically you're going to be looking at your character build to solve your
yes,
problems
yes,
compared to looking externally.
yes. And that goes into the whole reason I wanted to talk about rules complexity is that rules complexity in and of itself is not a good or a bad thing. It is really based on player and GM uh, comfortability. I mean, if you are comfortable in a rules heavy system and your players are comfortable in that system, then that is a good system for you. If you are the opposite and you prefer super light systems, and your players prefer super light systems, then that is a right system for you. Uh, what really has to kind of happen when we talk about rules complexity is understanding that how they interact, how it interacts with, and impacts gameplay, approachability when bringing it to the table, all of that stuff. Rules complexity impacts a lot of uh, external, outside of the table uh, things in the hobby in and of itself. So a lot of rules complexity doesn't actually take place when you're slinging dice. Uh, a lot of it takes place before you ever sit down to create characters. I mean, legitimately.
Nice.
Am I wrong? I mean, if somebody came to you with a system that was just overtly complex and you couldn't make heads or tails of it, are you going to play it?
I will play any game. I would never run it.
Okay, that's a fair. Well, that's a fair answer. There you go. That's a fair answer. People and other people would be in the opposite boat. They would run it maybe, but they would never play it, or alternatively, just won't touch it at all because it's just too complex to them. And so you got to take all those things into account when you're discussing rules complexity and what rules complexity looks like, what it is, how it works, and what it does to the game. Uh, and the bigger thing for me when talking about rules complexity is understanding that rules complexity, like I said, is not good or bad on its own. It is something that exists, but like anything, it's a tool. In RPGs, it's a tool. Um, some
Which
games run it better when they're complex. Good. Sorry.
What's your thoughts on complex games systems gearing towards optimal play?
I'm not a big fan of optimization. I think people. I shouldn't say people. I think the idea of optimization and character build play, kind of defeats the purpose of playing a character. Because what you're really trying to play at that point is you're kind of trying to play a Mary Sue or Gary Stu. And the best characters I've ever seen played in D&D campaigns have been flawed, deeply flawed. Uh, yeah, they have like an 8 intelligence. They have a 6 strength, something like that. Their stats
That does
their stats reflect a lot.
that doesn't fly in
No,
Pathfinder.
no. Which is why that's why I don't play Pathfinder.
Neither do
I
I.
mean,
People like to harp on
with,
5th edition a lot, but 5e, just like the 2014, just the
yeah,
base rules, pretty solid.
if you look at
Pathfinder, on the other hand,
very
ugh,
optimization, but like I said, it's actually one of the reasons I've always been a big fan of game systems that let you take advantages and disadvantages or perks and flaws, whatever you want to call them, because it allows you to give your character a mechanical uh, benefit or penalty, however you want to view it, for taking a negative to your character or design. So, like, I was talking to you guys before. I played a character in Deadlands that was Randy, and pretty much would sleep anything that had at least 2 legs. And you talk about a character that got himself in trouble. Yeah, that's a good way to get in trouble because you start hitting on married women and all kinds of other things.
so back to what I said about
Mhm.
consistency. A lot of for simple games, a lot of the load that the GM has to
Mhm.
consider when running it is literally making consistent rulings within the established fiction and keep like the same tone for the
Mhm.
table because it's more of a trust issue with the
Yep.
players. When it comes to more complex systems, players could be like, "No, I could actually do this. It's written right here," and I'm like, "Oh, it." You have the book and the players acting as adjudicators in that aspect. And I guess that I don't know if that's good or bad. What's your thoughts on that?
Honestly, I'm I'm torn on a lot of this because, like I said, I kind of fall in the middle of everything. I sound like a fence sitter right now. I really do, but I do.
No, well,
Go ahead.
let me rephrase it. So there's a reason why there's the term dungeon master, and you'll have like GMs, like Mattias who was
Yeah,
on earlier, who gets really excited to kill
yeah,
players, but frustrated when he can't because the rules don't allow him to.
yes,
In a rules like
yes,
game, there's nothing but
yeah,
uh
yeah,
the referee. The referee has to be a neutral
yeah,
arbiter
sure.
to the rules
Yeah,
because you could easily just
yeah, yeah. If you look at realistically, look at like character killing characters, right? Um, a lot again. You're correct that a lot of people who take that think of themselves as game masters and DMs, they don't see themselves as referees. But if you actually read the book sections on game mastering games that use those terms, um, you see that those sections basically tell the GM you need to be a fair arbiter of the rules. You need to be a fair arbiter. Even Gygax's first edition D&D DMG, which I would honestly argue is one of the best manuals to ever read in your entire life if you want to know how to run games, uh, because he goes into all kinds of crazy stuff, talking about what the role of a DM is and everything else. And he basically says that because he talks a lot about consistency in roles. You know, if you're not going to use a role from the DMG in the game, you can't just start randomly applying it all of a sudden. You either
true,
going to
very
use it or
true.
you're not. Kind of thing. So when you get somebody who uses the GM role as more of the god of the table role, um, I'm not a big fan of that. Um, again, you've played with me enough, man, and you've seen my face when I try to kill one of you guys and my dice just betray me. So I'm not actively trying to kill you by like fudging dice and stuff like that. I'll openly admit when my dice betray me. Don't get me wrong, I have tried to kill player characters before and failed miserably.
Yeah. So the way I play as like a neutral
Mm,
party. I'm actually, because of the style, the way I GM, because I'm not a
mm,
novelist. I actually solo
mm,
game before the game, and I actually play the game with the players. So a lot of the times, I'm just as surprised when things
mm.
happen when they are. I treat it
Sure.
more like a
Yeah.
game than anything,
Well,
and it seems to work.
well, just using a real world example, the alternative game. You guys pretty much, I'm giving you leads and I let you guys follow them in whatever order you want, however you want, as long as you're willing to bear the consequences of it. We still
Yep.
have it. You still haven't figured out what the consequences of kidnapping the janitor are. Uh, you know,
So I wanted to ask about GURPS because that's a heavy system. I don't think you guys talked about.
no, it is very heavy. Well, it can be. Its base system is not bad. It's once you start adding in modules that it gets really goofy.
So you have a pool of fungible points,
Mhm.
right? Or
Mm.
stats, am I right?
Yes.
20 plus skills, and like, was it 7 advantages,
I
disadvantages, or is it
I can't
change?
remember offhand. Been a while since I've read the book.
That sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, it can be.
uh, so I think the cool thing about like rules like games, you tend to be more players tend to be more proficient at their
Mm,
tasks, at their
mm,
job, while in rules heavy games you become more
mm.
specialists. I think that's what the cool difference between
Yeah.
them are. White Hack in particular, you're pretty much it combines both worlds because it is rules light. You are a proficient adventurer and stuff
Mhm.
like that, but what you're able to do is triangulated from what your profession is
Yeah.
and your
Yeah.
class and any other abilities you have that triangulate with that. Uh, in White Hack in particular, you often run into situations where you don't have someone who knows how to pick locks.
Mhm.
Um, because of how specialist they
Yeah.
become. Because people don't tend to play just like a
Yeah.
rogue often, at least in
Yeah.
my games. They play weird made up classes that are pretty
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
But the it's the cool thing about like henchmen because you could hire someone who can crack safes.
Yes.
You don't really
Yes.
need a rogue.
Yep.
You don't really need a wizard
Well,
anymore.
and that's something else that I've kind of started switching to a little bit. I've moved away from strictly class-based games for the most part. I've become more of a fan of skill-based games that allow you to build the character you envision, no matter what level of complexity the roles I'm using, because I think that better reflects actual people. Um, so, like, classes feel like a straitjacket to me anymore, where like, oh, I'm playing D&D, I'm playing a fighter, so you kind of know what you're doing. A fighter is gonna he's gonna swing a sword, and he's gonna hit people. Whereas play a game like I'm trying to think of play something along the lines of Dragon Bane, right? Which does have a profession system, but the professions are a lot less generic, and their talent base reflects that a lot better because it's talent and skill based rather than, oh, you're a fighter and at fourth level you get this ability, at eighth level you get this ability. That's kind of boring to me anymore. It really is, irrespective of the complexity of the game. And
The
and somewhat in rules like games, you even in class based rules like games, you don't get that quite as much.
White Hack has like the Wise class at
Yeah.
third level. They get a magic item they get to customize, which is pretty cool. But it's also like, what can I do with
Yeah.
this? Like,
Yeah.
how can I make? They get focused on like, what can I make that would carry over and be useful at like level 8? And I'm like, just don't think about it too much.
Well, and like I said,
It'll work out in the end.
well, and
Way too hard about it.
and there's game systems that I would consider rules medium, rules light, rules medium. Kind of they kind of flitter between those two, like Cortex Plus. It's a little crunchy, but not super crunchy. But it has a really cool mechanic in it that you get to create what they call distinctions for your character. And distinctions for your character, uh, they don't want to be too broad, but you don't want them to be too specific. So a good example is uh, of a distinction could be like former alcoholic. Like Nate Ford's a former alcoholic. So what the distinctions allow you to do is if you can tag the distinction in a roll for some reason, you get an extra D6 on the roll. So like say Nate Ford, the character person playing Nate Ford decides that he wants to act drunk to catch the attention of two security guards, right? And so he's going to roll his grifter and another die, and then because he's acting drunk and he has that distinction, he gets another plus D6. And it's actually a really neat mechanic because like it really lets you kind of flesh out your background for your character in a mechanical way. It actually gives your background some mechanical benefit,
Uh, hmm.
which is that's always neat to
On
me. I always like that kind of stuff.
Did you talk to Marius about how combat's different between the two?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about subsystems in general, and honestly, combat in roles heavy games drives me crazy because a 3 round combat will take you 4 hours.
but some people
Yeah,
like that.
again, there's nothing wrong inherently with that. It's not my cup of tea, as could be based on my body language. It's not my cup of tea.
Some people Some people like the, battle aspect
Hmm.
of the game. It's the reason why Shadowdark is so popular because they just made the entire, uh, exploration phase just you're constantly in combat, and some people
Hmm.
like the, turn by turn,
Yep.
"Oh, wow, this
Yep.
is cool."
And hey, all the more
Uh,
power too if you like it.
yeah. Rules light systems, I'll be honest, like, combat a lot of times can be handled the same way, like, you have a tense negotiation or doing
But
other
in
um,
old versions of D&D, you had so if you run into a random group of monsters, you have your reaction, you have your surprise roll, you have your reaction roll, then you can have initiative before you ever get to the first round
yeah.
of combat. Because it may turn out the people you ran into actually aren't hostile to you. So
The one The thing I like about White Hack is it reminds me of Battle Brothers, the
mm,
video game, because, it is based off of, 0th edition
mm,
D&D, but it keeps the attack of opportunity, which may sound strange to people who, like, really like
yeah,
BX. They're like, "Why would you do that?" And I'm like, "Because it's the only way players could get extra
yes,
attacks." And the way Battle Brothers works is you basically set up your, battle
mm,
line, your formation, and you basically, chug away, at the enemy,
mm,
like, information. You don't wanna be running out in the
yes,
open just because of the fact that, like, you might, be exposed to
mm,
multiple free
yeah,
attacks from enemies, and your focus is basically trying to set up, um, situations where, you help your,
mm,
comrades, especially, a strong class. They have an ability that allows you to push an enemy, forward by, like,
mm,
10 feet
yeah,
away, and you could choose to take up that space, but b that movement causes a free action attack for your comrades to take
mhm,
advantage of, which I didn't see any other
yeah,
RPG game
mm.
do this. Because in all other systems, when you push an enemy, it doesn't trigger an attack opportunity. This game
Well,
does, and,
um,
because of this
go
rule,
ahead. Sorry.
um, uh, it doesn't implicitly say, but strong characters wants to walk around with a polearm to extend their
Mhm,
reach, because not only they could do in tight
mhm,
hallways, but when front lines or in the back lines, you could basically cause a whirlwind of attacks
nice.
in a
Um,
round with that
I'll
buddies.
tell you a combat system that I read that I really liked was Fabula Ultima. So Fabula Ultima basically says once combat starts, you're considered to always be within reach of anything that you can hit, but it has to be within reason. So, like a character wielding a sword can't hit a flying enemy, as an example, because it's based on JRPGs. So, in combat in Fabula Ultima, it's not about positioning yourself and you don't get all these flanking bonuses and all that because the combat's more abstract because of what it's trying to simulate,
Yeah.
which isn't that's not a bad thing. I mean, honestly, it's not a bad thing.
So um, for campaign longevity in particular, uh, I think you need a certain level of crunch to
Mm-hmm.
keep many people engaged just because of the fact they want to reach the next level. Uh, they want to get this cool ass feat,
Mm-hmm.
spell. It's like games, you don't really get that, and you have to rely on more narrative type
Yeah.
stuff, like, you know, building up your fortress or buying up an inn. Uh, a game that basically relies
Mm-hmm.
heavily on basically, narratives for long campaigns is Traveler,
Yeah.
just because you don't level up, you're playing a max level character.
Yeah. Well, like I said,
You level up by dying, running.
rolling a new character. Honestly, like I said, it's complexity in combat. it's going to vary based on what you're looking for. You know, some games are going to be about positioning and all that kind of stuff. I'm thinking like 3X, 4E, 5E, Pathfinder, those kind of games. Then you got games like Fabula Ultima, which are very abstract combats. Then you've got things like 0E, White Hack. The combat's not quite as abstract. There's more hard and fast rules for like how far away you are from the enemy and all that kind of stuff. Because that stuff matters. And you just kind of got to find it when it comes to rules complexity. You kind of got to find your sweet spot for combat. Because if you're like me, I want my combats to be exciting, but I don't want them to take forever. So, like when you guys, just again referencing the alternative game, you guys are getting near the end of this arc, right? And I think you guys know as well as I do, you're going to have to confront the bad guy, probably violently, right? Let's not hide the football on that. You guys are very likely going to have to violently deal with this bad guy.
We don't know who the bad guy is because the guy that we thought the bad guy is.
Yeah, you found that out last session. He's now dead. But long story short, when you do confront the enemy, if it goes into combat, I don't want that combat to last the full like hour and a half session, 2 hours we play. If ideally, I'd like you to be able to get out of that combat in about 30 to 45 minutes. Ideally, it doesn't mean that's what's going to happen, but ideally, that's what I would prefer to happen. And alternatively, you can get out of combats pretty quick because of the way the damage system works. So, just so you know, because you guys have only had one like halfway combat in the entire game. For the record, you do realize, had you guys not figured out what that glass orb did, that demon was going to beat the crap out of you, right?
Yeah.
Just letting you know.
I got pretty beat up, and
you guys up.
when it, what was I going to say? The
while you're thinking, I'll say this: combat structure is vitally important to me when I'm reading combat rules, and by that I mean like how you get to your actions and stuff in combat is as important to me as how combat plays. So, like a game like Hero System that uses the 12 segments. Alternative using the marginal through amazing section action segments. I actually think I'm starting to kind of prefer that type of combat over standard initiative, where you can act multiple times as long as you act fast enough and all that kind of stuff. But
the Metal Gear Solid game, Crisis Averted Present Day, it's using the tick system from Exalted in a similar fashion, and players been digging it. It was a little weird at first because they had to get used to it, but they've been digging it.
Yeah, Exalted is actually a good example of that system. I really like their tick system because you do roll initiative to get yourself onto the clock, but each action has variable ticks. So, like an attack, I think can take like 3 or 6 to just make a basic attack. So if you're acting really slow, you may only act once in a round, versus somebody who acts really fast could act like 3 or 4 times in a round.
For White Hack in particular, like it has a full-blown combat system for system being so light, but it's strange because it acts like OSC, where players have 1 attack per round, but you also have attacks of opportunity. The strong gets extra flowing attacks as they level, but other characters get like I think 2 max, and no, I think it's 1. But in general, monsters could get multiple attacks per round as they level up. So you're basically forcing the players to figure out their situation. You get special combat options like charge, grapple, You could trip them.
Mm-hmm.
So you have all that. It's just you're limited to one attack unless you press the advantage.
Yes.
Which can be difficult in situations.
Yes.
I think it's what sets it apart combat-wise with, like, say, BX or any of the older editions of Dungeons and Dragons, because it did it did keep out text opportunity, which I know people on a general whole are glad to not have to deal with it anymore.
Yeah.
But if you utilize it correctly, like if you have a battle formation where your formation of your party is important, it makes a lot more sense.
Well, dude, I could keep going on this for another couple hours, but we've been going for over 2 hours, and I'm trying to keep this.
Oh,
Yeah, no, it's because you joined late. It's all good. We're gonna wrap this.
yeah,
We'll wrap this one. We'll wrap this one up with final thoughts from you and me. I'll go first. Let you close out, and we'll close up. Overall, guys, hopefully you learned a little bit about rules complexity, kind of how I view rules complexity. Got some different ideas about what it can mean and all of that. As far as rules complexity, guys, only you can determine the comfort level you have with the complexity of the rules you're using. And there is absolutely nothing wrong at your table if you enjoy super complex games or super simple games. There's a reason that games, everything from Fate to Rollmaster, exist. And it's because everybody has a different taste. So, play to your heart's content. And all I really care about is that you're playing. If you got anything to add, Atmos, go ahead, bud.
All right. Yeah. What he said, if you enjoy a game, I'm not saying it's wrong. Just don't expect me to run Hackmaster. I'd rather be a player and cry a little bit. But yeah, thanks for having me on.
Not a problem, dude. Well, let me go ahead. I'm gonna close this out, and then as always, guys, thoughts, comments, questions, concerns below. Follow the 3 rules. If you got anything to add, I'm more than happy to hear it. Otherwise, guys, we hope you have fun, and we do hope to see you guys around the game table at some point.